As Aaron reiterated at last Wednesday's council meeting, our understanding from a staff perspective is the goal of today was to really just allow the council that forum to talk about the projects that are in the plan. As you know, we have November 30th. There is a forum that is scheduled to discuss urban renewal plan and its projects, and in particular opportunities to partner with the private sector to implement the plan and certain projects in the plan. So we will have that feedback for you summarized, after that November 30 meeting. So that may help to inform this, but I think today's goal was just to kind of become more familiar again with what the projects are. So we'll discuss the 18 potential projects listed in the urban renewal plan. The relationship to your council goals is to provide the cooperative shared leadership involving council, staff, and the community. This is just a reminder of the workshop you had last month where we introduced some ideas about how the Urban Renewal Board could partner with the private sector on 6 or 7 particular projects. Several of them are going to be implemented by the city/urban renewal district, but others are anticipated to be implemented through the private sector, and that workshop we addressed some of that and how some mechanisms to do that. So that first bullet is just kind of a reminder that this plan doesn't really give us specific direction on how the Urban Renewal Agency revenues should be administered with private sector partners. But it does lay out 5 major goals and objectives. And those are economic development and employment, public involvement, redevelopment, development, fiscal stewardship, and housing assistance. And maybe before I leave this slide, I might just remind you, the plan was adopted in 2016, and there was a feasibility study performed before the plan was adopted. There was an urban renewal task force that was created to look at the feasibility of that. The council reviewed that feasibility study in March of 2016 and then gave staff direction to proceed with adoption of the plan after that. There were several public engagement activities that happened around that time after the feasibility study was completed and before the council actually adopted the plan. A couple of those were there was a plan report given in July of 2016. There was a recommendation by the Urban Planning Commission in July of 2016. A notice was given to all citizens of Grants Pass about the plan. There was a copy that was forwarded to all of the taxing districts that are impacted in the plan. A presentation was given to Josephine County Commission in July of 2016, talking about the impacts of the tax increment financing on them. And then the hearing was held in July 20th. So just wanted to give you a little bit about that background. So here are the 18 projects. We'll just quickly kind of remind you of what they are currently. There's a slide at the end here that gives the exact allocated amount for each project. These first 2 deal with the city's sewer plant and water plant. That 18% contribution to those projects is derived from the percentage of land that is in the urban renewal district, that 18%. So there's a direct correlation there. Third project, the North End improvements. This deals with water and sewer and transportation to some of our industrial lands at the North End. Both this project and the next one, the Spalding area, are specific to the percentage that the Urban Renewal Agency would contribute to these projects, and that's 25%. This really deals with infrastructure and using urban renewal money to improve the curb, gutter, sidewalk, stormwater, other public infrastructure, water flow requirements, new reservoir. Those are part of the Southeast project. Vine Street was called out separately from the other North End industrial area. This is similar to those infrastructure and water and sewer, 25% participation. Building rehab programs. So this is one of the larger ones in terms of the allocated amount in the plan. This focuses on rehabbing unsightly, uninhabitable buildings. Talks about how the program could set up low or no interest loans. There could be a grant element. So this is for really any building that is within the district, urban renewal district boundaries that needs some rehab work. Another project is the business incubator. This was pretty hot and lively at the time the plan was being discussed. Had some energy kind of drop away from it, but more recently there has been some renewed interest expressed from a nonprofit in town to pick it back up. So this is basically designating a reasonably small amount of money proportionally to the overall for that project. Convention Center, that was the largest allocation in the original 2016 plan. Exploring partnerships with hotel chains to locate a convention center in Grants Pass. Town Center Plaza, the council received a kind of an update on this several months ago. That was identified as a specific property that the council at the time thought was worthy of calling out specifically for potential use of urban renewal funds. Public park improvements, Riverside and Reinhardt in particular. Not all of Reinhardt Park is currently eligible. I wanted to point that out. There's a few parcels that are inside the urban renewal district that are in Reinhardt Park, but not all of the park. Underdeveloped land. This is another fairly significant allocation in the plan for this. There are underutilized properties where there could be some higher and better uses. It's a fairly broad category. Study streetscapes and streetscape implementation, focusing on how in that southeast industrial area in particular, using funds to improve the streetscape mainly through landscaping. And then the downtown area, money was called out for the potential downtown plaza, restrooms, projects that could be limited, that would be sidewalks and street trees, decorative street lighting. You received an overview of the downtown plan a few months ago as well from Mr. Love, who was the landscape architect who looked at that downtown core and some of the amenities. So that would be another potential project. The next couple were added just a couple of years ago. The housing development program was not part of the original 2016 plan, but was added later. This really focuses on kind of that pre-development assistance, completing off-site purchases or improvements. So if you are an affordable housing developer and you have a piece of land and you need some assistance potentially from the agency to get sewer or water to your property, the funds could be used for that. Public swimming pool. This has gotten some recent discussion, and there's another slide here showing that it's called out as an urban renewal project. but it is not currently, the caveman pool is not currently within the boundaries of the Urban Renewal Agency's district. So that would have to be a modification. So here's the allocations that are shown. You going in the same order that I just went in, kind of walking down through there. We do have, and I don't know if Adam's on today, but I should have put those in there. We do have an estimated amount of what that 18% would be for the water and sewer, but that's not shown on this chart. So we have North End 4 million, Southeast Industrial 5 million, North 6th and 7th Corridor 4 million, Blighted Building Removal 1.25 million, Northwest Industrial 3.2 million, Vine Street 575,000, Building Rehab 2 million, Business Incubator 3.1 million, Convention Center 8 million, that's a drop from the original one. Town Center Plaza 4 million, Public Park Improvements 1.7, Underdeveloped Land 6 million, Study the Streetscapes 150,000, Downtown Plaza 2 million, Housing Development 3, and Public Swimming Pool 5. And just a reminder, those are numbers for the total amount that would be allocated over the course of the 30-year plan. The Urban Renewal, it was adopted as a 30-year plan, so these do not represent fund balances that are currently, available. This is the total allocation over the life of the plan. So this map shows in the red outline here, starting off of 7th Street and then extending down past the high school and then going up 9th Street. That is the property that would have to be brought in to the Urban Renewal District in order to use funds on the current caveman pool location. And of course, Wednesday night, you did affirm through resolution that caveman pool's current location is where you envision the future pool being. So that's just like about 2.4 acres total, including some of the right-of-way along A Street and 9th Street in order to bring that in. There's a difference between minor amendments and substantial amendments when we're talking about changing the urban renewal plan. It triggers to be a substantial amendment, which means going through the full public hearing, more, broader public noticing if you do 1% or more, or greater than 1% of the area is brought in. So if this was the only change, it wouldn't be a substantial, it would be a minor amendment. Not that the council couldn't choose to do more public outreach, but that's what the law says. So council discretion on your call to action here. This is just kind of to get the discussion going, I think.
Thanks, Brad.
Yep.
Council, do you have questions? Valerie?
Well, this is a starting question. I'm sure there'll be many more. The acreage for Caveman Pool, is that the city property, correct? So everything around that belongs to the school district, and that 2.4 acres is what includes the right-of-way and the acreage that the city owns, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep. The majority of that is the right-of-way.
Okay.
The 1.5 acres is just the right-of-way to connect that property to the current district.
Okay. And I guess my other question to that, we did do a minor amendment, am I correct? Was that 2 years ago? And that brought in the land down on Terry Lane for the
Yes.
housing, am I correct?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so there's not a time limit as to when you can do the minor amendment. It can happen anytime along the way?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
There is just a amount limit, and with this addition, we're probably close to maxing out the additional acreage that we could add to the urban renewal agency.
Without doing a major, or just that we could add in total?
I think that we can add in total
Okay.
for the urban renewal agency.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Brad. Just to follow up on what Valerie said, I don't know, maybe we need more clarification because I was under the impression that we could do minor amendments, which is what this would be. But then the urban renewal agency could grow larger, but it would just be a major amendment. So is there a maximum size that the urban renewal agency can be? Is that what you're saying?
There is a maximum size of up to 25%. We're 18%. Cities have in the past, when they've shown interest in adding additional urban renewal agency space, sometimes they've just entered into and created a new urban renewal agency for specific purposes or reasons. For us to get to the 25% may require a major amendment if that's possible. I think we can only do up to 2% or something like that with a minor.
Okay, great. I have a few questions. I've got a question about the North End improvements and Vine Street. Is it my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, are those in generally the same area? The North End improvements and the Vine Street improvements?
No.
They are in generally the same area, yes. Yes.
Okay.
There is some industrial land that doesn't front on Vine. And as you move into your discussion, I'm happy to, I can pull up a map to kind of zero in on that. Sorry, I didn't have that ready, but there's quite a bit of industrial and business park property that is in the North End that is also on like Hawthorne and Washington. Mm-hmm. There's a little bit there that stretches over closer to I-5 that doesn't have Vine Street frontage. So I think that's really all that's talking about.
Okay. I think this is just a brief comment, for future urban renewal discussions, it might be good for, at least for me and maybe for council, to have like a printed copy of the map, like 11 by 17, just
Sure.
to reference for these things, because there's stuff all over. But I also had a question about the convention center. I met with Aaron about a month ago and talked about some of this stuff, and the printout at that time said the allocation for that was 7 million, and on your presentation it was 8 million. So I'm not expecting that to be necessarily clarified right now, but I just wanted to let you know that those numbers didn't match up, so I wasn't sure why. And then I was also wondering where we're at with the makerspace, because I know that we took an action on that outside of the urban renewal agency. I believe it was, I just want to maybe get refreshed on where we're at with what we did for the makerspace, so I know how it relates to future urban renewal resources. So
what the council did most recently was passed a resolution that committed a match from the city to Community Connections, which is a nonprofit in town whose executive director is Kat Bonney, and they had identified a USDA grant that would have given them several $100,000 to sort of capitalize and initiate the user space, the maker space. Your resolution basically said if your grant is successful, the city will match using urban renewal funds. They did learn recently that they were not successful with that grant, so that money will not be forthcoming anytime soon.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Other questions? How about those of you on the phone? Do you have any questions?
I do not, thank you.
Valerie?
I just want clarification, because it seems to me the last time that we've talked about it, that just because the money is earmarked for these does not mean that it is tied in specifically. Am I correct? That's just kind of, when you make a plan, it's good to have a plan and just kind of know that this is the money that will be brought in over 30 years, and based upon that, this is kind of what we're looking at. But if other things, I mean, we tried to make them broad enough and take in the industrial areas all over, so that if somebody or a business or a company was looking in our area and wanted to swoop down and use some of that industrial land to create jobs, the money is there to be able to utilize. Am I correct? I'm just kind of trying to say, why we specifically laid out those amounts, because I don't think they're set in stone per se. I think they're kind of generally meant to cover those areas, so that if something happened, we could also, because the purpose of the urban renewal in the years we set it up is truly to increase the tax base. And by increasing the tax base, we're trying to bring in industrialized and jobs to increase that tax base. So I just wanted to
and
clarify.
maybe Adam or Aaron want to add on that, but that's exactly my understanding. And it is a plan. Having the specific numbers in there, do give some guidance to if a private developer or property owner approaches the city and says, I'm interested in using the money for, rehabbing my building or helping to install some new infrastructure, then, there's a basic guideline there. All that would end up coming to the Urban Renewal Board, yourselves, for approval, but it does kind of set some, general priorities for the public as they read through the plan. But it's, again, this is all open for your discussion.
Can you tell me right now exactly how much is sitting in the Urban Renewal Fund at this point?
Well, the FY22 budget that was adopted in July had the fund balance at approximately 2.3 million.
But it's also known that we can borrow against it. So in other words, if somebody comes in and says they want 25% for us to do a particular area, we could go out and get the money to give them and do that. Am I correct? I mean, if it of course would have to come before the board, I understand that. I mean, we have to go through the process, but I'm just saying, is that something that could happen at any time?
Yeah, the Oregon Revised Statute that guides all of the urban renewal does say that, that is an eligible use of urban renewal funds, is to borrow. That is a power that is given to an urban renewal agency.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions? Brian?
Yeah, I had a couple more. On the Vine Street improvements, it calls out water, sewer, and transportation. And I'm wondering if there are other opportunities to fund those specific projects out of the transportation funds or the other enterprise funds as opposed to urban renewal.
Yeah, and then maybe I can look to Jason to see if there's any input there.
That's always an option. Those plans were there to help leverage private development in that area, so that if me as a private developer had to come in, set up a new business and extend the water, do half street improvements, it's to pay for their share of those. But you can direct staff to do public projects in those areas as well. It's just not high on our priority list right now.
Okay, so the way it's structured in urban renewal is the city is still paying for the city's portion, and we are using the urban renewal to help the private investor to pay their portion? Is that?
Yes, we're incentivizing investment and development of property and land, especially employment land in the Vine Street area that you're speaking of, to where we may pay up to 25% of improvements that would be required and necessary, like stormwater, sewer, and water infrastructure. Those are responsibilities of the developer, and that's the way it's set up here and in the majority of cities across the nation. Is the developer is responsible for building the impact that they're there. And so if they need 200 feet of water and sewer line, they pay that 200 feet of salt water and sewer line. And in this situation, the Urban Renewal Agency is not paying for their 200 feet. They're paying a percentage of it to help incentivize that development to occur.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. The one other quick question I had was about the Riverside Park line item. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought originally that just called out Riverside Park, and in this presentation it calls out Riverside and Reinhardt Park. So I wasn't sure if that was an update or I just missed that originally.
No, the portion of, I think what happened is the recent update, recent being 2020, when there was a minor amendment to the urban renewal plan, called out Reinhardt in the narrative. That was added into as an eligible public park, even though graphically, that portion of Reinhardt was always annexed in as part of the urban renewal. I think this was just being more specific with the narrative. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And then just lastly, if the Urban Renewal Board chooses to add another item to this project list, what is the process to go about that?
Yeah, so it would be a similar process to what we did in 2020, which is, you can go through the public process of identifying what it is that you want to add in, as a project. The specific notification, I'm not going to remember off the top of my head exactly what that notice is, but we do tend to recommend that the taxing agencies that are impacted by urban renewal be notified of any change that is happening to the city of Grants Pass district.
The key point is you do have the flexibility to either remove, say, I'm just going to throw out the convention center, something that was hot when the plan was built, but really recognize that made this community and communities this size, convention centers are very difficult to actually run at not a loss. So if that was something that was no longer of interest to council, we've got a multi-million dollars in that account. You can move it around to some of the other programs. So if you were to bring in a program, you would need to take, because we've only got a piece of pie, and there's like 8 different pieces there. And so if you put a 9th piece in, you're going to have to take some of that area, some of those resources from the other piece slices in order to you can't create new, in addition to the Urban Renewal Agency current dollar amount.
Yep, thank you.
Rick?
Brad, can you refresh my memory? Why are some projects showing 18% and others are showing 25%?
Well, the 25% was selected by the council at the time of adoption of the plan as just saying, okay, here for these, I think we had 2 or 3 infrastructure projects, as Aaron was saying, as part of the incentive. This is what we thought at the time would be enough of an incentive to kind of maybe trigger some development. It's not linked to the size of the agency, which is what the 18% in the ORS sets that percentage. If you're talking about interest and other, the fiscal side, that's more directly linked to the percentage of land that is in the urban renewal as a percentage of the city limits. But the 25% is not tied to that. That was just chosen as an incentive.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. All right, council. Open it up for discussion. Brian?
So, urban renewal, the agency and the projects, it's a big thing. There's a lot going on in this list. And so I think maybe what I would start with before I get into the nuts and bolts of what's actually in here is it might be good for us to have some sort of regular meeting on urban renewal, like a quarterly meeting where we're just kind of, you know, seeing what's happened in the quarter, seeing where things are going. And I think as we develop some of these projects, I think it's going to be more difficult for council to stay on top of everything that's happening. So before I get into any of the weeds here, you know, us kind of approaching it in a haphazard way, just kind of making meetings willy-nilly, I don't know. It just seems to me like it might be better if we had regularly scheduled quarterly meetings to work on urban renewal so we can keep it moving so it's productive. And so it's kind of stays top of mind for everybody so we don't forget what's going on. That said, I'll just get right into it. I think we should probably drop the convention center from the list. I don't think it's a right fit for our town. I think convention centers have kind of fallen out of favor. They're not as popular as they used to be. We're a small community. It just doesn't seem like a good fit. So I would start there. And I would also propose reallocating some of that funding to look at purchasing the Redwoods Hotel building downtown, the historic 6-story hotel that has been vacant for decades. I think that is a poster child for urban renewal. I think if that building was revitalized and turned into a hotel, it would be a huge boost for the economic vitality downtown and for our city as a whole. So I'll just start with that. Thanks.
Other discussion? Rick?
I also agree with Brian on the convention center. I think right now, with everything else that's going on nationally and so forth, that conventions moving here are probably not in the near future. But the other question I do have, if we totally take it off the list at this time, in the next 30 years, let's say 20 years from now, they want to put it back on the list. By totally taking it off, is it off or you can bring it back?
You can bring it back. That'd be something you can include again.
Okay, thank you.
Rob?
Yeah, the other thing too, Rick, it would seem like either take it off the list or just change the allocation to $1. You know, it stays on the list. But as far as the convention center goes, even when it was put on, and even 2008, when it was originally discussed, or maybe it was even discussed before then, I thought that was just a poor idea for this climate. I think of the conventions that I've gone to, not during COVID, but prior to that, you know, there was 2 at Palm Springs, there was 1 in Clearwater, Florida. Warm weather, sunny, attractive places where you can swim and play golf and enjoy the beach, etc., draw conventions. And in the winter here, I remember in 2008 asking the consultant, we paid the consultant huge money to discuss the convention center option at that time of the River District plan. And I remember saying to the consultant one-on-one, look, in the winter we don't have a lot of tourists here. And he said, well, don't you have fishermen who come in the winter? And I said, yeah, you maybe have a dozen hardy souls, but this is not a place that draws people through the winter at all. So I'm in agreement also that the convention center is, even if after COVID times people still go to conventions, I don't think that they'd go to conventions in this climate 6 months out of the year at all. So I would definitely be in agreement of taking that off the list. And on the Town Center Plaza, it just seems to me, I know we have some possible discussion there, but it seems to me that it's sitting there right now, the 4 million and the idea, and I think to move that along would be, we need to get a stakeholder task force to move that along, because I don't think there's anybody in the council that has a clear vision of, what we would like to see there or why we'd like to see it. But I know we all kind of feel it's important because it happens to be right smack in the middle of our town. But I think to move it forward, I think we need to get a stakeholder task force that meets regularly, and then after that, maybe bring in a consultant. But I think we can move that along because we all know it's important, and we haven't taken really the first step to make that happen.
Valerie?
Yeah, I tend to be in agreement with the convention center. I do know that there are some towns, I think Madras is one of them, that did put a lot of their urban renewal into a convention center and then kind of lost their shorts on it because they can't, it's number one, it's off the bankrolls because now it's a government facility, and so they don't even get any taxes from it. So I can see that, and I want to once more just want to say that the purpose of this urban renewal is to partner with private enterprise. And we don't always know who's going to come to the plate with a project. And so it's really important that we let people know that it's here, it's available. We're more than willing to work with somebody to get something moving, and I think that's important. But I do not think it's our job to go out and buy a piece of property to do something. I think it's our job to be there, and that's why the 25% was there. It's just like, we're here to partner with somebody because the purpose of this is to bring in this is incentive to bring in private development and private developers. So in my feelings are very strong that we don't necessarily go out and start thinking about what we want, and that we have that money available, and be it a task force or whatever. I mean, we do have a business advocate, and I have talked with her, and she's talked about the fact that there are people circling out there looking for a place to launch their business. And in this day right now when a lot of things can happen remotely that couldn't happen before, and because we don't have any huge swaths of industrial land, this is an opportunity that we might have to bring in a company or something. And I think it's really important that we are standing there ready to partner with them when they come in, because to me, job growth is the most important thing we can do in our community to bring up our median income and make other things happen. So I hesitate, to start looking off at the things that we can tip off and think we can do, and try to bring in the get the private enterprise to come to us and tell us what they want to do.
Anybody else want to weigh in? Those of you on the phone?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor.
Mayor,
I
this
also
Joel.
agree.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Vanessa, and then we'll have Joel.
I also do agree that the convention center project should be dropped from the list that, as outlined by other councilors, it just really doesn't line up for our community. And that's really all that I have to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Joel, go ahead.
I think we got true consensus on the convention center. I don't know if us that would support it at this point in time. I like what Rob talked about with the town center plaza and a task force to look at it. I would commend Brian DeLagrange for trying to have his idea on what to do down there and move it forward. But that task center can look at other options as well and come back to us with what is feasible and not feasible. And I think it's ripe for discussion. I also support what Valerie was talking about, and our housing development especially. It seems to me like we can take some steps forward in that as well. The thing that kind of strikes me is the balance in the account. So we would have to bond to get even the caveman swimming pool. Which is okay, but that just means you pay in interest and it doesn't go in projects. If I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, that our balance in the account right now is $2 million.
Yeah, I think figure out where I wrote it down. 2.3.
So it's not like we have $80 million in cash sitting there ready to spend. We have $80 million of future cash flow that which we can bond against that, depending on interest rates, may or may not make sense. So anyway, good discussion.
Rob?
Yeah, and just addressing Joel's point about the account balance or the fund balance right now, well, that's, I guess, a fiscally prudent way to look at it. If we really won't be able to, if we really take that to its extreme, we won't be able to do much of anything until we're, years 10, 20, or 30 into this thing. So, we're just going to be able to nickel and dime little projects along the way. So if we want to think big or be able to help an outside developer, an outside business person think big, a bond maybe would be necessary at some point. I'm not saying that we have to, but if we want to think bigger than, $1 million a year, then we've got to consider a bond. Well, I definitely agree with Valerie as far as the city's role in assisting private enterprise. I think, and in general, I think that's a really good way to look at it. With regards to the Town Center Plaza or possibly the Redwood Hotel, because they are so centrally located, I think that's something that we need to look at as far as possibly incentivizing it, dramatically for a private sector. I don't know how much the city wants to get involved with Town Center Plaza, but the fact that it is such a critical location in our town's footprint, we may want to look at that a little bit differently if it comes to it. But I definitely like Brian's mention of the Redwoods Hotel only because, well, for several reasons. Number one, as he says, it's basically been non-productive for decades, and when it was being used at all, I think it was only the ground floor. It was used basically as a warehouse. So it really hasn't been used to its full potential, and that really could be a real crown jewel of our city and our downtown area, held in the right hands and with the right application. So that is a really interesting idea to look at, and it may be what the city's role and what the urban renewal area's role is on that, or agency's role on that is not clear, but I think that's definitely worth considering, as is the Town Center Plaza. And again, trying to, whether it's through a task force or whatever, trying to get the ideas of private sector people involved in that, and what they would need to move forward is what I would want to hear. What would someone from the private sector need? What kind of help would they need to move forward with the Redwood Hotel? Or what kind of help would they need from the city to move forward, making the Town Center Plaza more productive and possibly more beautiful? But again, I wouldn't necessarily feel like we're handcuffed by not wanting to bond, because we'll only do nickel and dime projects for 30 years if we think that way. Thank you.
Kurt?
In the presentation that you sent out on email, there was some discussion of the strategy of grants versus loans, and we didn't touch on that. And so I was curious. I understand the statement that having another loan could impact another lending agency to loaning money on a specific project. But if we're loaning it lower than the cost of money and making it very attractive, it seems like that would be a better incentive, or an easier incentive to broadcast around and attract people. So I'm curious about the thoughts about that. I mean, my feeling is that money is like water. It only has power when it's moving. And if we can move it out and then move it back in and keep that money moving, we gain more power over the long run. And I'll just add my last 2 cents in on the Redwood Towers. I definitely think that that should be on our list because that's really become a star in Ashland where they have basically the same building. And so I would want to encourage that as well. Thanks.
Counselor, I think you're right. Cash flow is extremely important to some businesses, especially when they're trying to retain or grow their business, and low interest loans, no interest loans, or whatever could be an excellent tool. We're hoping to maybe hear some of that at the forum coming up on November 30th. And from there, we'll be able to put together those recommendations. But that's something that Brad and I have talked about as a potential area to bolster, is just what you mentioned.
Brian?
Yeah, I just wanted to circle around on the frequency of talking about urban renewal. I don't know, I was kind of hoping to get maybe some more opinions from council as far as, should we just keep doing it like this, where when a counselor feels appropriate that we talk about it, they bring it up and put it on the agenda, or should it be more structured where we have quarterly meetings about urban renewal that are scheduled every quarter? Because I think right now in this beginning phase, like, it's still very early and we haven't set everything up for all the programs. And so it seems to me more appropriate to maybe have more regular meetings while we get all the details worked out, and then later maybe not. But I'm interested in what other counselors think about it.
Rick?
I think I agree with
Here's
Brian.
Joel.
Oh.
Go ahead, Joel.
You know, there's nothing wrong with that. That information is good. The other thing, though, I think that we've been lacking as a council is putting on the agenda implementation of the highest priorities on urban renewal projects. We got Caveman Pool, and that's true. But the other ones, we really haven't had course or have done the homework necessary to, with a couple of exceptions, to say how are we going to, what does this look like, and how are we going to move forward to get this done? So in addition to updates, I think we need to start putting some things on the agenda to implementation. I'm not sure what an update would be worth without implementation. So I look forward to that, and each of the council priorities, strategic planning, both from last year and coming up this year, to make that happen.
Go ahead, Rick.
I'm also supportive of Brian and having a report every quarter on the urban renewal funds. I think that would be keep us in touch of what the projects are out there. Second comment, I also like Valerie's comments on the Redwood Towers. I don't feel the city should be in the real estate business per se of owning buildings. If a developer wants to come in and we partner with them through this process, which it's set up to do, I would be supportive of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Valerie?
Yeah, I think, you know, we did have this not too long ago. I know the city did kind of try to say, okay, what steps and how do we bring in the private? What do we, I mean, that was the last urban renewal thing we had, was just like, okay, how do we set the parameters up so that a private enterprise or somebody interested in these funds can come forward? And I do think that that's imperative that we have that together. So if I can get that going, and I know we started that, and I think that's what we have to have. I am looking forward to the forum that's coming up at the end of this month on November 30th, because I think we do need to set parameters, because we can talk about it till we're blue in the face, but the truth of the matter is it's meant to be a partner. So people who are out there need to know, what do we do to get something proposed to the agency? And so that's what I'm looking at, hopefully trying to get established right away, is the steps that they would need to go through to come to the urban renewal, to ask for funding.
Anybody else? All right. I didn't catch whether Joel said what his thoughts were on quarterly meetings. I caught that he said he was interested in implementing some things rather than just getting a discussion going on just the projects in general. Is that correct,
So,
Joel?
Mayor, what I was,
Go ahead.
I have nothing against quarterly meetings, as long as they're worthwhile. I don't want to put the staff through work where we just get the same presentation a quarter from now, which means then we have some type of progress or implementation between now and the next meeting that would change the information that we're looking at. So I would look at it as all of our abilities to start to kind of develop and implement these, and then as we do that, then we have those meetings and updates. I wouldn't have it just for the sake of updates. I would, if we got a bunch of grants, got a bunch of cost share projects or something like that, but if there's no change, then I don't want to put the staff through it. I guess it would be an easy thing for them to do. They just give us a statement today, but I don't want to waste your time and my time doing that if there's been no change.
Right. I think, Brian, would your idea be that having a regular meeting would help implement some of these ideas?
Yeah, I think the idea of having regular meetings would be, part of what Joel said is, you know, once we have these grant or loan programs dialed in, you know, we would maybe every quarter review what has come in and go over those. And then we would also just work on, you know, getting any updates on projects that are currently be working on and changing priorities as needed. I wasn't thinking that they needed to be necessarily long and that we had to go over every project every time, but just something to make urban renewal more regular. So, because the way we're doing it now, it kind of seems like we're getting the same presentation every time. So if we have a little bit more structure, maybe it could be more productive.
Okay. Kurt?
Regular meetings would inspire some accountability, and if, like Joel says, there's nothing to report, I think if there's a meeting, somebody's going to be incentivized to make sure there's something to report. So if we want progress, we're going to ask for it.
Okay. Rick?
The other aspect I see happening there too, we are talking about it, it is on TV and it's being reported apart. So for people that may not be aware, we have Urban Renewal that gets it out in the public as well.
All right, well, we have at least half the council is interested in meeting more regularly on this topic, which we do have a couple of other action items, I guess, related. We have that forum coming up on the 30th that we need to, after that forum, double back to what Valerie mentioned regarding the process for any sort of private grants and whether the council wants to establish that or how to go about wrapping that up. We have 4 council members at least who are interested in some sort of discussion regarding Redwood Hotel. Not sure what you want to do with that to get the ball rolling. And then a couple of people have mentioned a task force regarding Town Center Plaza. But only a couple of you. So, is there anything else you want to do today, or just wait for that forum on the 30th? Valerie?
I would prefer to wait till the forum at the end of this month and then go from there.
Brian?
Yeah, I agree. I think that this was a good discussion and we'll have the forum and then we'll have another meeting here in the near future.
Okay, everybody agree with that? Sounds good. That's what we'll do. Thank you. Strategic planning process is up next.
As I'm setting this up, Mayor, Council, I just wanted to confirm the quarterly reports for urban renewal, is that an action item moving forward, or is that something that we're waiting on and having a discussion later on?
I think at this point, let's wait until
Okay.
after that meeting on the 30th, and we'll come back around to this.
Sounds great. All right, good afternoon, Mayor, Council. It's my pleasure to talk about the strategic planning process, which we have coming up. We're already in the midst of it right now when it comes to gathering information, and we're going to review the process. So if you have any comments or questions, we can incorporate some of those things in the upcoming session. So the strategic planning process really starts with you focusing on reviewing the state of the city, and you do that a number of ways. You ask all your advisory committees to provide you with recommendations on what they would like to see in their realm of expertise when it comes to moving forward in the next year to 3 years or so. You get that type of recommendations from staff. We have community forums and opportunities for the community to also provide input on what they'd like to see with our community, what we're doing well that they'd like to see more of, what we need to improve on. And then also you yourself have and go through a process, through a worksheet process, through strategic planning to determine what you would like to see as a counselor for this community. And we incorporate all of those things and all of those ideas into the strategic planning process. And you analyze all of that input. And that's a lot of input. There's pages, walls, actually walls, because we put all of them up on the wall, of objectives, actions, and goals. And you go through and you define those through your strategic planning process so everyone understands what you're looking at when you ultimately need to rank and prioritize some of those strategic plan actions and objectives. You ultimately then adopt the strategic plan, and that strategic plan is the guiding document for our work plan. Our work plan is that additional information to your strategic plan that provides building blocks on how we're going to ultimately achieve your goals. Once that's established, we have a really good idea of what those resources are to achieve the goals, and that's how we prepare the budget. It's a great process, and then we attach resources to the work plan, which is directly related to the strategic plan. The budget committee appropriates those resources, staff implements the work plan, council and the community monitors the success, and we ultimately do it again and celebrate all of our successes each year. So going forward, how can you as a council member help make the strategic planning session most effective? First, you're being asked to provide some important information in advance of the session. Like I talked about, there's some worksheets that you'll be filling out. We're asking all the council members to come to the session prepared to listen, discuss, and make comments and decisions for the city. To come to the session with an understanding that probably not all of your goals or strategies may be the same priority as others, and that we will need to look at some kind of process where we're compromising and we're prioritizing and understanding each other on the goals for the community. And finally, be prepared to focus on having a lot of work, fun, and when it's all over, the satisfaction of knowing that we've done something extremely productive for the community and for the organization. So before the session, each council member will submit a community analysis, which is a list of strategies for the 22-23 work plan and ultimately the budget. And you'll be working together on those concepts. These worksheets will be distributed to all council members prior to the first goal setting session. We're going to combine all of those things, and we'll put those together in a package for you, and you'll get a binder for the strategic planning session that has all of that input. And that will have the input from the community, from staff, and from all the individual council members and your advisory committees. You'll be asked to list your top goals, objectives, and actions through this process, and what you'd like to address and see next year and beyond. You may want to use your experiences from past years, your discussions with the community, your perceptions about the future, and concerns that you've generated through your tenure to add to this worksheet. The strategic planning is truly a collaborative effort and process, and it is a focused process. And the outcome is amazing, but the process is just as important. When you enter the strategic planning session, you'll find an already posted and ready for processing the summarized results of all of the input that we've received from the community. So it's going to all be in front of you there for you to look at. The strategic planning steps that are involved in this is a process that goes through your advisory committees. We're getting input now. We're gathering that. Ultimately, in January, there's a 3-day session that you'll be attending at Thursday, Friday, and sometimes most of Saturday, parts of Saturday. There is a process to go through this. And this first step is we start with usually a team building exercise of some sort. Then we move into effective councils. And then we go into step 3, where are we now? Now steps 1, 2, and 3 are all done on the first day. So usually all day Thursday, we'll go through and should be able to accomplish most of what you see on the screen right now. You'll have an opportunity to hear where we are right now with the fourth quarter report, service levels of operations. That's where you'll hear from all the department directors and what kind of levels of service we're providing right now to the community. It's your opportunity to also provide feedback for us for future service levels and developing the budget of, well, we understand this is the current service level, but we would like to see the service level here, or we would like to see the service level there. So it's an opportunity for council to provide guidance on service levels so we can be prepared to adjust for in the future. You also revisit your mission, vision, values, and goals and affirm those. And you're also asked through the worksheet process to develop strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and we go through and review your SWOT analysis together as a group. And that's pretty much a real full day. So step 2 starts with what ideas do you have about becoming a more effective council? Effective councils is part of that step 2 on the first day. So we talk about your experience as a council member. Are there opportunities for improvement? What are we doing well? And this is an opportunity for you to provide input on you working as a team, both with council, the community, and staff. Just additional information on step 3, you'll be asked to reaffirm and suggest the mission, vision, values, and goals. The goals usually don't change every year, but sometimes, and neither does the vision or mission, but we have tweaked it over time and just made it that much better to reflect the personality of council and the direction of community. Step 3 is that SWOT analysis that I mentioned. That involves a collection and portrayal of information about the internal and external factors that have or may have an impact on the evolution of a community. It generally provides a list of community strengths and weaknesses and what is indicated by an analysis of its resources and capabilities. Plus the list of threats and opportunities will ultimately be a full analysis, and this process helps us frame future patterns of actions to match the strengths and opportunities and ward off threats and seek to overcome our weaknesses. Step 4 is day 2. And this is another full day where we start off with committee and commission reports. Each committee gets a half an hour time where they talk to you about what the committee is recommending. You have an opportunity to also ask questions about their goals, so you have a clear understanding of what's on the board. We'll give you a report on the community forum and what came of that and what the public's input was through this process. You'll then hear organizational reports. Now, these organizational reports are the reports that the department heads are going to provide to you. These are things that department heads feel as though are important either for the organization or for the community that we believe we would like to get some support on and council awareness on. And so we'll bring those forward to you through the strategic planning process. And then you'll have an opportunity to talk about all of your goals as an individual. We'll have all of these identified. Each one will be identified on, and some of the goals have been referred multiple times. It could be that the community wanted this goal and so did a council member. And so we'll show who provided the recommendation for that goal, action, or objective. You'll have an opportunity to champion your goals that you have up on the board, explain why you have those goals up there, ask questions of other people's goals, or champion someone else's goal. From there, we go into step 5, which is prioritizing strategies and actions. That usually occurs on the 3rd day of the strategic planning process, to where you already have heard from your advisory committees, you've heard from staff, you've heard from the community, you've heard from yourself as individuals and as a council. And now it's time to take a look at all of those objectives and actions and try and prioritize those for the future of the city. And so we go through a prioritization process. And at the end of the day, you'll have a general idea of what your top priorities are and what the future strategic plan would look like. And that concludes day 3 of the strategic planning process. So this council item was brought up as a discussion point for you to provide input and have a discussion on the process before we begin in January. And if you have any suggestions or changes to the strategic planning process as identified by council, we can talk about those today, and we'd be more than happy to incorporate any of those. Mayor, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Aaron. Council, do you have any questions? Valerie?
Yes, I don't remember it being called State of the City, but I think it's a great idea. The forum that we will be having on November 16th is the beginning of that process. That's when we're starting to get from the community what their concerns are. Am I correct?
The forum that we have?
Yes,
that
the
forum is
November.
the strategic planning session forum, where we bring the public in and we want to listen. It's a listening session, in essence, focused on strategic planning and what they'd like us to bring forward.
And what I'd like to have, and I think we had it the last time, is the ongoing visual of what we have, of the things that we have accomplished. Because I think last time we had that here. I think it's a really important, and it's a real nice opportunity for us to see what has, and some of the goals that we have put forth in the last few years, and the progress towards those. If you know what I'm talking about, that big sheet of paper that has the pictures.
Our
of the things.
Q2, which shows
Yeah.
future projects and where they're going and when they're happening.
Right, and what we've come and accomplished on some of our long-term goals. Will that be presented at that time?
We haven't fully put that together in the past. I'm not sure if we've done that portion of it during strategic planning. We're more focused on a couple of other things that we could try to maybe incorporate something like that in the
One of the reasons I want to bring that up is having been here since 2015 and seeing the progress and what happened and how it happens every year, and I think it's a wonderful process. I really do believe in it. I think it's great. But sometimes some of the goals that come up are the long-term goals, and I'm going to use an example of the water treatment plant. It just seemed like every year that it comes up, and every year it comes up, and then it's just like, well, why is it even here? We're not going to stop building the water treatment plant, but it's also a real good visual to be able to see how long it takes a project like that to get through, to completion, and it gives us an idea of like the water treatment plant and some of the things that we have done through the goal setting process. And that's been like I said, I think it's an absolutely wonderful process. I think it's really important for the public to get involved and to see and be involved with the city in what we're doing. So I really encourage people to come to that. But I think it's also a real good opportunity to celebrate some of the things we've done, and so to understand the process and how it works. Because I know with Rick, we've joked about sometimes it's just like, well, do I really want to put my dots on that? Because that's been going on for so many years, it's not going to stop. So that's my only iffy about it is that sometimes I think that what we're really doing is setting up our goals for the next year, and yet at the same time, where's the long-range planning part of it, and how do we make those two mesh?
Anybody else? Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. I think the process that we use is very good and very thorough. I just had a question about, I don't have any experience with how other cities tackle this kind of process. Is this something that other cities do? Are we unique in taking on this annual process, or is this, I'm just looking for a little bit of perspective.
Sure, I could definitely answer that. I don't know if someone like Councilor Riker might want to maybe take a stab at it also with your tenure here and what you hear at League of Oregon City Council meetings and stuff like that.
Brian, at the League of Oregon Cities, a lot of cities were just totally amazed at what we do and the input we get from the councilors in the process. So I would say we're a leader.
Great.
I have been asked to do and have in the past done concurrent sessions at the League of Oregon Cities on our strategic planning process, because it is very comprehensive and provides a good result.
Joel, did you have
City
something?
Mayor, this is Joel.
Yeah, go ahead, Joel.
You know, I've been involved with strategic planning throughout my whole career with my previous organization, and I've been to training on it, and it's a next step so that we don't get caught in the weeds. We don't start doing tactical things rather than strategic things. And if you don't know where you're going 10 years from now, this is the process to help us get there. You got to identify where you're, and it gives input to everybody, and it's just a great way to go. I was impressed with it compared to other processes I've been through, and the other processes I've been through haven't been that. So anyway, I really like it.
Thank you. Anybody else have questions? Guess not at the moment. Thanks, Erin. Did anybody want to have further discussion on this? Brian?
Yeah, one of the things that I remember from doing it this year was at the end when we do the exercise with the dots and the projects on the wall and everything. I just wanted to maybe get feedback from other counselors because, you know, it's a little complicated. There's like there's the dots, and then there's like a multiplier if there's a certain amount of, you know, counselors put a certain number of dots on certain projects, and I'm not totally sure why there's a multiplier, and I don't know if the fact that we're all doing it where everyone else can see is having counselors being influenced by other counselors' decisions when maybe we should be doing it on paper, or, you know, I don't know. It's a very unique process, and I just wanted to see if other counselors thought that it was, if they're happy with it, if there's modifications that we should think about, but I'm just not sure where I'm at with it.
Looks like Erin wanted to weigh in on that.
Yeah, I can provide some information if you'd like on that. It has been modified over the years, over the 10 years that we've been doing this. It started out with a little bit of a simpler process, but recognized that some things needed to change when it came to the prioritization of the, say, for instance, the multiplying factor. And I'll give you an example of why the multiplying factor is in there. And so if you've got 5 council members and they, I'll put 5 dots on an item, that's 25 dots. If you have, and that's 5 council members, that's a majority of the council. If you have 3 council members or 2 council members that, that put 10, 10, and 5 dots, that's 3 council members that think it's a high priority, or two council members that, you know, put on 10 dots, another one that you've got, or however many dots they want to put on there. The multiplying factor, what it does is it acknowledges and recognizes that the number and the different number of council members do have a weight. If there's an item that has a specific interest of 5, 6, 7, 8 council members that got a score 50 versus an item that has got a score 50 but only 2 or 3 council members, there should be a weight differential there because of the number of council members that are interested in seeing that move forward. So that's the reason for that weighted purpose. The one thing that I would potentially change in the future when it came to the prioritization and the numbering of prioritizing that is exactly what you said. And there's been other reasons why some of the rules have changed and on making those numbers come up to something that is you know, has some kind of something we can rely on, is the potential of having everyone vote and giving them all a tablet or doing it all without people on the board. So that would be the one improvement that if council is interested in doing that I would potentially recommend, is that you score your own and at the end we tally everyone's without everyone else seeing. However, there's a positive about that, and one is you're not influenced or swayed by other individuals putting on weighted scores. But I also see as a negative to that is that there's a lot of camaraderie and team building in the process of going through and talking and discussing what and why did I put 5 dots here, and why did I put 2 dots here, and what do you think about this? And the discussion that occurs there is extremely healthy discussion between council. And so that would be the one negative about doing that suggestion.
Rick?
So Brian, I like what Aaron said, that a lot of times I'll put 1 or 2 dots on something and then I'll be talking with another counselor why they are not going there. And just due to their background and their knowledge, I tend to agree with them. So I may actually take those dots off of there and then find another project that I've listened to somebody else and their passion and their ideas. Again, I feel my knowledge is limited, so I appreciate being able to interact with the other counselors and say, why did you choose this project over that one? I may agree or disagree, but it gives me that opportunity to change my mind at that moment. Thank you.
Valerie?
Yeah, it's been an interesting process, and I have watched the modifications that have come through, and it seems like every time we make a modification after somebody's learned how to game the system. I mean, that's how it works. That's kind of how the real world is somebody figures out how the system works, and then somebody figures out how to make the system work for them. And I've seen that happen. There's been a few times that we've just had a few counselors kind of come on the side to decide what big projects they want to go through, and they put all their dots on there. So, that's it. That's where it's going. So, this has been a process of going through this to see, well, I don't really like that, but that was something that happened. And so, I've seen that happen. So I think the way we have it is good. And you're right. The first time you go into it, you're always kind of like sitting in the background trying to figure out what in the heck just happened, sort of thing. But I think that, that the ability to talk about things and to be able to stand for a project that says, hey, well, now think about this, is also valid, because we all have to work together anyway, ultimately at the end. And so that way it just gives you that opportunity. I mean, you know, as a counselor, you kind of have to be strong and stand up for what you believe in and be able to say, no, I'm not buying that. But sometimes you really can see somebody's expertise and go along with it. So I am in support of how we do it. I can see minor modifications as we go through it, but it has evolved and gotten better every time because we've seen what can happen. And so I think that's just something we have to continue to evolve and watch. But I do like the way that we do it, because at this point in time, I think we've gotten some of the bigger bugs out of it.
Erin, I don't recall, is there a cap on how many stickers somebody can put on any one item?
Yes, there is. That would be 10 per item.
10, okay. And then as far as the multiplier goes, do you recall how that works?
Yeah, you have a multiplier based on the number of council members, the different colored dots. That's why you all get different dots, so we can know how many different council members are actually voting for a project. Like I mentioned before, if you had 20 dots and it represented 2 people putting on 10, or you had 20 dots and it represented all 8 council members putting 3 or 4 or 5 dots on there's that multiplier effect that recognizes that.
But I guess I mean the specifics, like I kind of have a vague recollection of something having to do with 5 dots and 3 people or something. Do you recall the specifics of what kicks in the multiplier?
I'd have to pull it up. It is in your packet when I give it to you. You've got the instructions and how the ultimate scoring does occur.
Okay. Anybody else have anything they want to bring up? Rick?
So Aaron, if we were to be given more dots, would that mess up the process, or just do you feel the number of dots out there achieve what they need to achieve?
So from my perspective, and I'm going to talk about it from, I've got 2 perspectives. One as a facilitator and then one as the city manager. So as a facilitator, we want you to be able to utilize this truly as a prioritization process, to where it's not how many projects can I get on the board, but what truly are the top priorities for council. And by keeping the dots to a certain number, that helps you really have to make the choice of, boy, I really like those two, but these are the top priorities. And with 8 council members and the mayor, there's a lot of top priorities that can come out of that. Now, as a city manager, wearing the city manager's hat, keeping the numbers down is helpful. Now that we have a very strong and robust strategic plan, we have a work plan that's over 42 pages long. We've got an amazing staff that wants to accomplish every one of your goals. But if you look at other community strategic plans, they've got a list of like 15. They've got a list of 8. They've got it in their work plans associated with that. We are extremely ambitious, and we have an amazing staff that has been able to do a lot of stuff. But if we continue to prioritize and not just our higher priorities, we're going to get to a point, which I think we are right now, where it's difficult for staff to keep up with each year's new additions of strategic planning items and still complete the other ones and make sure that we're prioritizing resources appropriately.
Vanessa?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Aaron, you just brought up a point that I wanted to bring up also, was the fact that the strategic plan has items that roll over from year to year. And it's hard to figure out just exactly when they were added to the strategic plan, what year it was. So I think that gets kind of confusing, and it really does water down the strategic plan and the sense that we're accomplishing things. It also may not even be priorities that the council has, or it may not even be needs that the community has, just because they become outdated. So that's one concern that I have, the rollover from year to year. I would like to see the strategic planning process recorded, at the very least an audio recording. I did receive a lot of feedback about that at the beginning of the year, and people just wanted to be a part of the process somehow, since they weren't able to physically attend. And another thing that I would like to see done is during the 3-day meeting, when the councilors' ideas are brought forward. I do recall this year that it wasn't cited who the idea belonged to, and I think if they were cited, it might allow that person the opportunity to give just a really quick, where they're coming from on that and why it's important to them. So I think that might be a nice opportunity for people when they bring forward their ideas. And I think that's all I have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian, did you still have something?
Yeah, I just to throw it out there, when we're doing the prioritization at the end of strategic planning, it's tricky with weighting the projects, because there's projects that are really big, like things like the water treatment plant, and then there's maybe something like, we put in this little bike connector trail somewhere that's also in the same group of projects. And, I remember, I don't know, those are just examples, but like, I remember when we were doing it, it's like, oh, I don't want to waste my super valuable dot on this bike path when, there's this really important, expensive thing. And so the projects are kind of like, there's this mental weighting that you do where, maybe this thing is something that's really easy to accomplish and doesn't take a lot of resources, but counselors don't want to waste their dots on it. So again, I don't have a solution for that. I just wanted to kind of bring it up because I see it as an issue with how it works, and I don't know how to fix it, but I just wanted to air that.
Valerie?
And I would agree with you, and that's what I was talking about, like the water treatment plant and something small. But there is a time, and I think maybe this being your first year, this next year you'll be more aware of it. There is a time when we kind of whittle some of them together before we go and do our dots. And I think maybe that's when we need to pay much more attention to those sorts of things and say, okay, how do we want it to be organized so that when we go to put the dots on there, we're all kind of coming from the same place? Because we do go through and say, okay, this is here, this is here. They're kind of the same thing. They're kind of under the same thing. Can we put them together? So maybe just in that process, as we go through that, we can hit some of those things along the way.
One thing that we could do from a facilitation standpoint to help address some of that is really look at the strategic planning process and have you as a policy board focus just on that. There's some of those things that are on that board that you're looking at that are truly just tasks. And you should be looking at, from a policy board perspective, the goals and the objectives at the lowest level. Tasks, that's something that should be just filled in from a staff perspective to fill those objectives and those goals. So if it was this one little connector trail or something like that, when you mentioned that as an example, that's truly a task. That's a task associated with connectivity of bike and ped trails, which would be an objective, which if that was a high priority, there's a number of little trails or whatever that could be attached to that. And so you'd be looking at, sort of like what Valerie was saying, combining these things to ultimately make an objective and not just have 5 different tasks for you to vote on. So we can try to look at doing that through that standpoint of getting it more condensed for you, but also during that day, maybe some of you, and it happens each year, where we do take a number of them off the board and put them under something else or something similar. So you have one less item to compete with your precious precious voting.
Yeah, thank you. That makes it more clear, and I think we did that with a lot of housing items this year. We lumped them all into one thing, so yeah, thanks.
Joel, did you have something to add?
Say, Mayor?
Yep.
I just had one thing. I think it's, it's a process. And so to automatically accept the results of any process as we go forward without thought and without with each other, it's just a process. So there's going to be flaws in the process, and that's why we have agenda setting at every meeting. And so if there's something that was a high priority that was missed, or that a small item that didn't have any stars on it that's going to, and maybe it's a task and not an objective, but we then don't use the strategic planning process through it, because it's not going to be perfect to get everything. We use it through the agenda setting session and address that way. Each of us had the opportunity to do so. So I think, it's just one process, and our other processes hopefully help make up for the that it's not a fully perfect process that we're going to follow. Absolutely, it's just it's kind of like predictions. You have to make adjustments along the way.
Thank you. Anybody else? Rick?
So Aaron, I like the definition that tasks are different from our priorities and so forth, but I don't know that we want to expand, because we could be micromanaging if we start saying which tasks have priority over another task. But if there's a issue of staff wanting to know council support for that task, I guess that could be a separate. But whether you want it, I'm not suggesting we put it in with strategic planning. If we did, it would be a whole separate area. We could use half dots or something, but but no, the only advantage I would see there is if you had a task and staff was hesitating as to whether council was fully behind it, you could get that indication. Thank you.
Anything further? All right, let's move on to agenda review. Our next workshop, next Monday, we have a presentation on the public health, mental health, and addiction services, what's available in this area. Then next Tuesday evening, we have a strategic planning community forum, and that's an opportunity for the public to come down here to the council chambers and weigh in on strategic planning steps and goals and priorities that the council should have over the next year. Then on November 17th, we have a Wednesday evening business meeting where we will have a public hearing to consider an ordinance setting up a construction excise tax, an ordinance on a property line vacation at Southwest 5th and Elth Street, a resolution to sell the West Park property as well as the Fruitdale property. Those are both city-owned properties. Resolution to set up the Sustainability and Energy Action Task Force that was moved off last week's meeting. And then the consent calendar has a resolution regarding medical insurance and dental insurance for staff, findings of fact on the zone map amendment for the Buckmaster property at 3322 Leonard Road, and a couple of committee appointments for the Committee on Public Art and the Parks Committee. Any questions about any of that? Brian?
Yeah, I have a question, and I guess it might be for Joel or for Aaron about next week's workshop. I'm just kind of maybe, just so my expectations aren't out of line, I'm just kind of maybe hoping to hear what you would like to come out of that meeting as far as, is it just informative? Is there a direction it's going? I'm just kind of unclear.
Aaron?
So what we have is we have 4 or 5 different agencies bringing, one person, some agencies bringing 2 or 3 different people to represent the agency, all that deal with mental health, public health, addiction services in the community, and have touched that somehow as a service provider. Right now, what I've done is I've asked all of those service providers, let them know that they have 10 minutes each as a general guideline for a presentation, and then questions from council. And that was hoping that they would focus on 2 things. And I sort of got this from the general discussion of what council was talking about on the dais. And the first one is, what services do you provide in the realm of mental health, drug addiction in the community? What is going well, and what do you need more to do better? So whether it be resources, people, programs, whatever it is, but where do you see that our community needs improvement in the services that you provide? So from those different service providers, that's sort of the general direction that I've got for them to try to touch on in their presentation, and then be prepared for questions from council.
Okay, thank you.
Joel, does that meet your expectations of what you wanted for that presentation?
Yes, it does. And thank you, Aaron.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Valerie?
Yeah, great. That was one of my questions, is who exactly was going to be there and how that was going to be presented. So that's great. I'm excited about that. I did have a question about when are meeting agendas posted? Because I had somebody go to look for the November 17th meeting agenda, and they said it wasn't on this website. So how does that work?
Julie, you want to?
For the business meetings, those are usually posted a week before, so when the packet is available to you, that's when we post the agenda, the same time, because that means that most of it's been finalized, ready to go, so generally a week before the meeting. But if there are some delays, like I think that the last meeting, it was on a Friday.
Okay.
But typically the Wednesday before.
Okay, that's what I thought. I thought it had to do with when the packets came out. I just wanted to clarify that with the person. And then my only other question on the meeting coming up is, I'm assuming that the West Park property sale, if that's the one that has been for sale for a while, and then the Fruitdale property is the one beside Fruitdale.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, and anything that anybody wants to add going forward? Not today.
Yeah, Mayor, this is Vanessa.
Go ahead.
I do have 2 items. We recently received a memo recommending in consideration of House Bill 2006, that council comes up with some type of criteria for approval procedure. So I'd like to see that on the agenda. This is for emergency shelters. And also I would like to have the discussion of permanent funding for our Department of Public Safety Services added as well. Thank you.
Okay, can you explain a little bit more about your first one, emergency shelter approval?
Yeah. We received a memo on October 29th, subject titled Warming Center Permitting Requirements. And it looks like there's a recommendation that under that emergency House bill, that the city council has some type of approval procedure for when those emergency shelters do come to staff and request approval. We don't necessarily have to come up with criteria because the legislation already outlines that, but we do need an approval procedure for that, just in case anyone does come forward between now and the time that that bill expires.
Okay. And that bill expires next summer, I think?
Yeah, it's July 1st of 2022.
Okay. Council, is that something that you wanted to have on the agenda? Brian?
Well, I'm just wondering if that's something that, you know, since we're not actually doing an approval, it's just more like creating an application, it sounds like. So I'm just not sure if that is something staff can do with us kind of giving consensus, or if it needs to be a full-blown workshop topic.
Staff, do you have an answer, or should we just talk about it later?
So it's certainly up to council to whether or not it wants to set up an application process, but by virtue of 2006, if it qualifies under 2006, i.e. if it meets the definition of transitional housing, that's the key term in, in 2006, then it's essentially a ministerial process that is subject really only to building permits. So if council wants to review these and, you know, set up some, I hesitate to use the word criteria because you really can't make up additional criteria. I think the law is pretty clear in that regard, but some sort of process where the council is the approving authority rather than having it approved via a series of, you know, building code applications, that's fine. Some other cities have set up a mechanism for doing that, and we could inform council of, you know, how they go about doing it. But it's arguably a bit superfluous just simply due to the fact that it's essentially a permit by right. It's not really discretionary at all.
Vanessa, is that something you think we need to have a workshop about?
After reading the memo, it's very clear that this is actually a recommendation from staff that this is brought forward. So after reading the memo and understanding what staff's concerns are, I was bringing it forward. And just to clarify, this is not a request to develop criteria. This is simply a request to develop an approval procedure, whether that be what the city of Eugene has done with it, which is just the organization submitting a letter and the Eugene City Council decides that that's sufficient. But this is me just bringing this forward after staff had recommended it's done so.
Okay. So, council, are there three of you who are interested in doing this? Brian's raising his hand. Kurt, is that a yes? All right, we got three. And a discussion on permanent funding for police. Is that a discussion that you want to have? Valerie says yes. Brian says yes. Okay, makes three of you there. Anybody else have anything to bring up today? All right, how about a motion to adjourn? Valerie?
I move that we adjourn.
Second from Rick. Thank you. All in favor of adjourning? Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, see you next Monday.